Probably so people can.
That would be 45.
So it's 1:30.
I'm ready. Don't forget.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we'd all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have roll call?
Commissioner Ansargi?
Here.
Commissioner Rushton?
Present.
Chairman Bonnick?
Here.
Commissioner Wessel?
Here.
Commissioner Sudis-Little?
Here.
Commissioner Rettenbach?
Here.
Commissioner Lautner?
Present.
All present?
Thank you. That brings us to public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the action items. And the first one up is a probate family court personnel request.
Good afternoon, everyone. Judge Marian Fromkowski and Family Court Administrator Joe Cobolo are present. And I know that you have all received our packet of information, and I'm not going to go page by page, but what I have handed out today, one of the pages, which just gives some numbers with regard to what we're going to be talking about here. And you know, our ask is that the position of Deputy Probate Register Recorder be reinstated. And if that request is granted, we would contemplate that would be a salary of approximately $30,503 and potentially be a level 2 position. And that is the base salary associated with the level 2 position, $16.76 an hour. I had the opportunity to talk to Judge Larry Nelson today, who was filling in district court, and I don't know if you knew or not that this was on the agenda today, but we talked about it a bit more, and I did provide a summary of our earlier conversation in the packet, but he indicated and gave me permission to indicate to all of you today that he wholeheartedly supports this request for the reinstatement of this position. So that is our ask, to reinstate the position and to allocate $30,503. We don't know what the benefits amount would be, and that would have to be computed, but that is our ask. And the basis for that ask, and that's where we kind of get to the numbers, there has been a 68% increase in filings in probate court since the Deputy Probate Court Administrator position was eliminated. And that's, you know, filings between 2011 and 2018, and those numbers are in front of you. Total number of probate filings in 2011 were 111, and filings in 18 was 164. That is an increase, but more importantly is the open cases, 264, and currently in 2018, 331. And we're only, well, we're maybe 2/3 through this year, but we will probably surpass that this year. So we're looking at numbers on a page, but all of these numbers represent vulnerable individuals. Probate court appoints guardians for children, for persons with legal, not capable of handling their own legal affairs, either through illness or age. We also appoint guardians to protect the welfare of not only young people, but elders when they are, because of their, once again, age or whatever their circumstances is, that they're not able to protect themselves and take care of their medical needs, their educational needs. We do adoptions, but that's really under more of the family division, but Susan Richards, our current probate registrar, also handles that. And those are very, sensitive matters. We handle administration of estates, whether the person holding the estate is currently still alive, or a probating of an estate after the person has passed. And we handle questions of the validity of wills. And once again, these are almost entirely vulnerable individuals and family-related matters. You know, everyone in these cases somewhat knows each other. Once in a while, well, not once in a while, but at certain points we appoint professional guardians or professional conservators, but more often it is a family member that steps into that role. Now, when these cases are filed, there is something, you know, I just waived the filing fee for a woman upstairs, but people come in and file actual legal papers. And a good portion of the litigants or the petitioners are not represented. So they come in with their petitions. You know, sometimes they're typed, sometimes they're handwritten. And you know, if I looked at everybody's handwriting up here, I may be able to read it, I may not be able to read it. You can probably read mine today, but some days. So that, you know, we're looking at petitions on a daily basis. And once those petitions are filed, very, very often, almost invariably, they're time sensitive. Hearings have to be scheduled very quickly because someone is alleging that someone is at risk. So there's a lot of preliminary work that needs to be done before this petition even comes to my desk and a hearing is held. And all of that falls upon Susan Richards to view the petition, to schedule it, to make sure the proof of services go out and the scheduling is done. If there are attorneys or someone from DHHS or Adult Protective Services, so everyone knows where they're supposed to come and at what time. So a lot of things are very time sensitive and intense right at the beginning of a case. And there also are emergency hearings where a person is suffering, you know, acute mental challenge, flare-up of some prior chronic condition that has erupted, and we need quick action to review whether that person, the sheriff's department should go out and pick a person up. You know, these are tough calls and tough for the sheriff's department to go out and do these things, but these are all things that we're handling. And even if that wasn't enough, a case comes to me, I need to listen to it and give a prompt recommendation, or not recommendation, a prompt ruling, prompt order, do the paperwork, get it back out to everyone. So there's a lot of mind work going on and a lot of paperwork. But that's not all that occurs in these cases. If a guardian or a conservator is appointed, or we are handling an active trust estate or an active will, validity of a will question, there is continued court hearings, but especially in the guardianship and conservator cases, there is, until that case is closed, there is regular, or there should be regular and consistent review of those files to make sure that and it's kind of a harsh word, but that the ward, the person who is being protected, that the ward is being treated properly, that his or her funds are being managed properly, that their medical care, the educational care is all right, where they're living is clean, that, you know, all the things that go on in life, that is happening appropriately for a person that I take personal responsibility for. And I take this, you know, pretty seriously. You know, if we're going to appoint someone to protect someone, we're going to make sure that they are protecting them properly. So these cases remain open until a guardianship is no longer needed, maybe someone's illness, they've recovered, or a conservator is no longer needed. Once again, it's mostly illness-related matters that they've recovered, or until a person passes away, or sometimes when a case is transferred to a different county, or sometimes even to a different state. But it's the active monitoring of these cases that, in my mind, is actually more important than whether the order is granted or not. Because once the order is granted, we have to be on deck to make sure that these cases are being monitored properly. And this all falls on one person's shoulders. Susan Richards has to make sure that the reports are filed. And very often, you know, when a conservator or guardian are appointed, you know, they get a letter of authority. And it spells out all of the things they're supposed to do. And it spells out, you're to file an annual report. Or sometimes I order a 6-month report. You're to file these reports. If a person, and so they go out, most guardians and conservators are not lawyers, they're not trained to, you know, read a lot of legal documents. they go out, and some are pretty good on filing what they're supposed to file, but if they don't, then a notice needs to go out and find the reports. You know, why would you file the report? Well, this also takes a lot of time and paperwork. You would think that it would be easy in this day and age of digital stuff, but these notices are mailed out. We don't do email to guardians and conservators. So these have to all be mailed out, and then when the reports come in, Susan, Ms. Richards first reviews them, and then I have to. I mean, the buck stops with me. I have to review these reports to make sure that the person is being treated properly, and that we're just not rubber stamping, you know, someone's request that, you know, could be detrimental to the human being. So this all needs to be done, and that takes a lot of time. And a good portion of Ms. Richards' days are spent on accepting new filings or managing the new cases that are coming in front of me. And the administration or review of the open cases sometimes has to get pushed to the back burner, even though it's essential because we have new cases coming in. And you know, the numbers are here, you know, 69% increase in cases, number of cases, open cases, so those are filings, but the open cases have increased by some 80%. One person is doing that job, while in the past, 2 individuals did the job.
Commissioner Red.
I just,
Okay, I had just one further comment. If I,
okay, you could.
Okay, all right.
You
So
finish
with-
up, then I'll.
So with regard to the administration of the follow-up of the cases, Ms. Richards, regardless of who was one person in that position, cannot keep up. And we are in the unfortunate circumstance that we are delinquent in some of the reports. So I personally don't know the status of more cases that I want to tell you about because we don't have the reports. And that's my worry. We don't know what's happening in a case. I don't know if the person is being treated properly. And that's my main role, to make sure people are protected. So one person can't handle the position. It's just, and you know, I would think that I personally am doing, you know, more I'm going to call it clerical, but you know, clerks are important positions, but more clerical work to keep up than probably any other probate judge that I've ever talked to. Their staff does these things. It has to get done, and the buck stops with me, and I need another employee. Ms. Rettenbach.
Thank you, Judge Krakowski, for putting together an excellent narrative in both your written materials that you provided for us and also in verbally going over what you just said today. I believe that we need another person to help. There's just no question about that. With all the increases that you have and the fact that the position was taken away years ago, which is kind of a mystery. We don't really know why, but
Right.
It's obviously very necessary now. One thing that you didn't mention is about the court recording part of the job, which, I mean, that kind of distressed me that records have been lost in the past and they didn't have the proper documentation because the judge was trying to operate the recording himself, and you know, you need another person, not only physically at the beginning and at the end of the proceedings, but during there to make sure that your recordings
Right.
are being properly done. So.
Right. When I came on board and learned that Judge Nelson was pushing the button on his own at the beginning and end of the day, I was very, very surprised. And there were a number of cases where either the button wasn't pushed or for a period of time the machine just wasn't working properly. But unless someone is there, court reporter is there to monitor, and you're supposed to check the machine. So fortunately, in at least one of the cases that I know of, the attorneys were able to reconstruct what happened on that day, and then they sent that summary to the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, but
So-
I mean, just, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just from that point alone, to my way of thinking, and then I like the idea of having the cross-training going on where if somebody's out, obviously, you know, at this point, it's like people are afraid to take a vacation because they can't cover each other, and you're trying to juggle so many responsibilities, which we all take extremely seriously, so.
Well, thank you, Ms. Rettenbach. Commissioner Rettenbach.
Commissioner Rush.
Good afternoon, Judge. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
I just have a question in regards to, you had said the method of accountability for guardians. Is it actually, from your department's perspective, is it the paperwork that's turned in to the courts? Is that how you monitor the accountability of those guardians?
Once a guardian is appointed, yes, that is part of it. But in certain types of guardianships, an independent, we call them visitors, an independent visitor is also appointed to go and do a home inspection, to go and talk to the ward, and to give us a set of neutral eyes to make sure that the guardian's report is accurate.
And who does that?
Those are volunteers mostly. They're CASA volunteers, and Mr. Poblo can maybe speak to that, but that would be CASA volunteers. And we have a list of volunteers that are kind of on deck to do things here and there. And yeah, I hate to report, but we're behind in getting those visitors out because in the process is kind of log jammed with all the administrative work that one person is doing, and it all flows from there. And so, yes, so there are neutral visitors, and any of you could volunteer and be one of those people. You don't have to do 15 cases, but yes, so there's the reports that we review very carefully. The judge Ms. Richards reviews them first, I review them, I sign off on them. I say, hey, I need more information, we call it up for a hearing, or to put in motion the neutral visitor to go to the ward and to determine if all is up to snuff.
Is there training required for these volunteers to be in the homes?
Well, it's training required for the guardians and conservators, but the neutral visitor, my plan is to call some of them have done it in the past, but to call a meeting to refresh all of our either prior volunteer or new volunteer to walk them through what is expected. We have check sheets that we go through, and with regard to all our volunteers, Mr. Pobolo runs a criminal history check. So we just don't let anyone who says, I want to do this. So there's an interview, criminal history check, and then with regard to the neutral visitors, Ms. Richards and I would be conducting that meeting with them to make sure they understand what is expected of them and answer their questions.
And then that information then is put inside the compliance file.
Correct. There's a confidential aspect of the file. And yes, that report comes back. I review it. If I have questions, I talk to the neutral visitor. If there are concerns raised, then I would conduct a hearing and call the guardian in to answer, or a conservator to answer. And if the answers aren't sufficient, then I suspend their powers and appoint a new guardian. But I can't do any of that until I know what the circumstances are. And
I'm just curious, when it comes to the financial aspect of that client, how does the court monitor for that?
So those are basically conservators, and they have to file, when they're first appointed, have to file an inventory within, I think it's 56 days, an inventory of all the assets. And they're given a court order to be able to go to the bank, to get the bank records, to figure out what all the assets are. They give us an inventory, and then they either have pretty broad powers as to how to handle those funds, or limited powers, and they need to come back in and ask court permission to spend funds in this way. But every year, or sooner if I require, they need to file an accounting of what the current status is. And that is numbers. And there's documentation attached. Those are numbers that need to be put into an Excel spreadsheet, crunched to see if the numbers add up. Ms. Richards reviews it, I then review it. If things are, are questionable, we call the conservator in.
And that's what I was wondering, if that was all part of the court handling that detailed information.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank
And
you.
that is a numbers game, but then questions. And then I do have the authority, similar to guardians, to appoint a neutral person to, to look over these records, to make
Finances.
sure. And, once again, hopefully I'm not going to find any mischief going on, but don't know without,
Sometimes you do.
yeah, that's for sure.
I had a question about, wasn't, part of the reason that you're behind is because Josephine Lingler was sick quite a bit this year?
No, Ms.
I mean,
Lingauer isn't doing any of the probate aspect.
But I mean, so somebody's, who's doing her job then when she's gone?
We had, I wasn't there last year, but we had Patty, what was it?
Boothroyd.
Patty Boothroyd came in for, not full-time, but to cover for Ms. Lingauer's, she had surgery this year. So she came in, but Ms. Lingauer doesn't do anything with the guardianships or conservatorships. She handles more of the juvenile delinquency matters that then go to Mr. Povolo. So it's,
So does Mr. Polo then do some of those, of her job when she's gone then, or?
of Ms.
You know,
Lingauer's job?
Yeah,
I'll let
doesn't
him
Susan
answer.
Richard do some of it, and everybody
Well-
chips into,
As much as we can.
yeah. I mean, do you help with Susan Richards when she's behind on stuff?
We try. Probate is a specialized world, and it doesn't necessarily mix well with the family court side of things. So, we try to fill in and can do some of the simpler things like accepting wills and,
But I
doing
mean,
some of
wasn't
the
she off for
initial-
months at a time,
Ms. Lingauer?
Yeah.
Ms. Lingauer was off. Ms. Richards, I had to almost order her to take vacation this year, but Ms. Lingauer does not, I'm talking about in terms of coverage for the current probate register, as Mr. Povolo said, it's really the basic things that are covered. Like putting a will in the safe. In terms of reviewing and accounting or answering questions for a guardian, and they may have kind of generalized answers, but Ms. Lingauer, although she has some past experience being the deputy probate register, we don't rely on anyone other than Ms. Richards or myself telling Ms. Richards what the answer to a question may be.
So, I mean, I would think it's a team effort. It wouldn't be just one person would do one job and nobody else does it ever. So
Well-
there is, I mean, with her being gone, things have to still get done that she does, and
That's why we're seeking the additional person to assist Susan.
No,
We
I
need-
guess,
we need two
I guess
people.
everyone in the office isn't cross-trained to do the probate work.
Right.
No,
Commissioner
nor are they
Hanson.
cross-trained to do the delinquency work.
Have you done any comparison of workload compared to, say, Grand Traverse?
Yeah.
No,
No, there-
I'm trying to say, are our people have a heavier workload compared to, they may have more people because they have more caseload, but, what are the numbers say compared to Grand Traverse County? Do we, yes, we have lower caseload, but per person, how much is each person doing on average in Grand Traverse County compared to our person here in
Yeah.
Leelanau County? I don't know if you've done that kind
Well,
of study or
I
not.
have, yes, I have, and I talked to Judge Stanton. Their docket is probably 2 or 3 times, even maybe more, bigger. They're a bigger population, so they have a much bigger docket. And I think they have 4 to 5 probate court employees, the registered deputy, an adoption special, or a financial specialist, and on down to even the person who's just typing stuff in. And there's one other aspect, we have to put all this information into the AS 400, I don't know if anyone even knows what that is, and the JIS, Judicial Information System. So all of this data then needs to be physically typed in for reports, and so in Grand Traverse, I mean, yes, they have many more cases and more employees. But I did do a little bit of research, look through the counties that are more comparable in terms of population, and sent out an email to those judges and got some responses, and then just with some informational things that are published by State Court Administrator Office, more often than not, the counties that were comparable to us in population had more than one employee, more than just a probate register. They had some other, a deputy or some other, they're called different titles, but more than often they had more than just a one-person operation.
So our people have a higher caseload per person compared to most other counties. Is that a fair
Well,
statement?
I can't say most, but for a good portion of them, yes.
Commissioner Wessel.
Thank you, Judge, for being here. Two questions. Is there a state review process to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do relative to filings and follow-up and records, and have we been audited?
It's not really an audit. I mean, it could be an audit, but there are reports that are filed, and they're all time sensitive, but the report with regard to whether we're getting the accountings and the reports in are filed in January and on July 30th. And it was the July 30th report that I'm referencing that I'm now realizing in my time here, we have more, they're called deficiencies. I think of them as delinquencies. Those reports aren't in. So that report goes to the State Court Administrator's Office, and let me just say, when I saw those numbers, I called, well, on my own, kind of formalized a plan. We got to dig ourselves out of this hole. I formalized a plan, called our regional administrator, who's Jerry Cole from State Court Administrator's Office. He hadn't seen the numbers yet. Told him what the numbers were, explained what my plan was. He said that sounds like a great plan. He gave me some suggestions with regard to the plan, and we've initiated the plan to start getting on top of these delinquent cases.
This question, you may not even want to answer it, but part of our responsibility, I think, is to make sure we keep the county out of trouble. And you've been here only eight months or so in your current position, 9, a short time.
Right.
But you've looked at things for the last several years. So my question, knowing that you might not want to answer it, but I'd like you to, how concerned are you about backlogs of jobs that aren't done, incomplete records, incomplete follow-up, or other issues that might cause liability issues for this commission and your court?
Even you asking that question makes my stomach churn. I am very concerned, and as I told Judge Nelson today, and as I've said to many people, I hope and pray that we don't find monies being misused or stolen, or wards that aren't being properly cared for. I mean, that makes shiver. Yes, I am concerned. And whether the liability aspect, I mean, the conservator or the guardian would clearly be liable if they were abusing someone or stealing funds. I mean, those are criminal things. The court is shielded from liability to a great extent, but I can't answer the county's liability. But in terms of responsibility for human beings, vulnerable human beings, I mean, that's a moral responsibility, not a legal responsibility.
Thank you.
Commissioner Law.
Yes, thank you. I find it kind of surprising that Judge Nelson would endorse this plan when he gave us every indication up until last year that things were working just fine the way that things were. So I guess if Judge Nelson wants to put something in writing or come before us petitioning for you, I could rethink my thought on this. But Judge, you were 6 weeks into the job and you were already asking for some help. up there. And I thought that that was kind of premature.
Excuse me, 6 months.
I think it was 6 weeks, if I remember right. This was on the February.
And we removed it.
And you removed it, so you were
Right.
already looking for help 6 weeks into your being on the bench. So, that being said, I don't know what is going on upstairs, if it's a management problem, or if employees aren't doing everything they should for you, or if you want to start working on more cross-training. I think that that would be a very good idea to do. But I do think that it can be handled with the employees you have. You know, you can talk increases all day long, but your caseload is not large. It is not a large caseload, especially for the amount of employees that you have. And again, you know, you want to do some math and bring us some comparisons to other counties. True comparisons like Mr. Ansari was asking for. There again, I think that would be some valuable information compared to the employees that you do have.
Do you have some information about that?
No, all I know is I haven't asked for the actual data. I've heard from other people who work in other courts comparable, and they said it's unbelievably light out here comparatively. So I do know that we see your employees sometimes sit through all-day meetings here. So I'm thinking it can't be really so busy upstairs if we've had
I'd like to know
employees.
who that employee would be.
Okay, we'll talk.
Okay.
And also, I was wondering about, you know, 30,000 is not the cost of an employee. So I think that's
That's
a
the
very
wage, and I
ill-prepared
did preface
statement
that.
to make to us to
No,
request an
that
employee.
is
We need
that's the salary, but the
full
benefits,
amount.
we put in our budget that would need to be computed at the clerk's office or the
It's a quick
treasurer's
question.
office.
My guess is 70,000. So
Well,
that's
that
what
very
we
well
have
may
to
be.
consider.
Yeah, right, I
not-
don't know those numbers,
Right.
that's what I said at the beginning.
So,
I know $30,503.
I do think that with some little bit of cross-training up there, a little bit of work, that you can make it work up there. I know you don't want to push the button to record or watch the recording. I think that could be done, or that perhaps there could be some help from somewhere within the building that could watch that for you if you are not comfortable turning it on or checking on it occasionally, et cetera. That is another hurdle that I think that could probably be overcome personally. So I'm not going to support the request.
Commissioner Sutis.
Well, thank you, Judge Kromkowski. I think you have presented a very well thought out, well planned case, and for supporting and the need for one more person. I think the question that Commissioner Wessel asked is a very good one. We can't have a situation where we are so far behind, where we have great concern for the welfare of those people that we're supposed to be overseeing. I appreciate your efforts to contact other judges and to find out what they have and to do a little mini survey. And you know the numbers. You were looking and referring to what people were telling you. So I am comfortable that you've done your due diligence, and I will be supporting this.
Judge, you had mentioned a lot of the workload for Susan comes from dealing with front desk, telephones, maybe some typing, and to me, clerical, anybody can do those things pretty much, you know, with a little bit of training. And so my question is, we have a temporary staff, we employ temporary staff here, and they're used throughout the different departments. Part-time, some of them, I believe.
They're all part.
They're all part-time. And like any other office, you know, there's days that are busier, days that are not. And have you utilized that service up there for any of these areas to alleviate some of the load from Susan's job? And if not, why not?
Well, the answer is no. The only temporary person we have brought on board, well, I can only speak for 2019, was when Ms. Lingauer was on medical leave. And I think I recall one comment you made at one of the prior conversation or presentations was, a lot of these things are online, and they definitely are online. People, and we have it on our own website, and Ms. Richards and I and others have looked at the website and keep it up to date. So yes, people can go online and figure out these questions, if they're savvy enough to do that, and that's problematic. But I haven't brought others in to help out with Ms. Richards' work. I mean, there's definitely, in terms of typing information into JIS and AS400, once you learn that system, it is a question of you learning the system and then typing in numbers. That's required on every case, and that doesn't require any understanding necessarily of probate procedure. And so that could be divvied out somewhere. But that's not the main part of the problem. It's the follow-up, it's the answering the questions, it's making sure that the hearings are scheduled, that the orders are sent out to everyone. Well, and even some of that maybe could be divvied up to more of a clerical position. But in reviewing the inventories that come back and the reports, a part-time, unless that part-time person had prior probate court experience, a part-time person without that training would not be qualified, and I wouldn't delegate a review of inventory or review of pleadings, which is more of the bulk of the work than the JIS or AS400. So the answers are not, but I haven't brought in temporary people to do any of Ms. Richards' work.
Well, I was hoping that we could alleviate some of the burden that your department seems to have. I think by utilizing possibly a temporary and training that person to a certain level to alleviate some of those responsibilities of Susan, it might be an opportunity to bring that person in as the need grows, as a full-time person at some point down the road. And I'm a little disappointed that the court did not consider using our temporary staff to alleviate some of the issues that you see currently before we jump into $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 new position up there. I would like to see you take that opportunity and see how that would work for your system.
So when you're describing that person, I'm thinking more of a part-time deputy probate register, as opposed to, when you say the word temporary, I'm thinking, people coming and going, and it needs to be someone who either has the experience or is trained on the job and is there really permanently, either part-time or full-time. But I was, maybe I'm wrong, but I was under understanding that in terms of a temporary position, we couldn't have a temporary position to run throughout the whole year. And bringing a person in just as needed, if it's not the same person, then you're training every time. So I think, I'm willing to consider that, but I would think in my mind that, we're not asking for a part-time deputy register, but the only way I would feel comfortable with that is if it was one person consistently there throughout the whole year to learn the process, and then if and when Ms. Richards retires or leaves or whatever happens, that we'd have someone on board who could step up, but not our temporary workers, as far as I know, do their job, answer the phone, do typing, but the training is the problem. So there needs to be one person trained, and if you want to consider a part-time, it's not our request, but part-time would be better than nothing. And I didn't think we could do a temporary extended employee. Maybe I was wrong, but that was my understanding.
Okay. Well, I think if there's no other questions, I think we'd be fine, and we can, we'll deliberate on this at a different time, not at this time. Now we're just doing interviews.
Okay, all right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next would be a sheriff and the Great Lakes Patrol Boat. Actually, is the next several items. Yeah, 4 times. Yeah, please sit down.
Hopefully we have our whistle taken care of, 6 feet back from it or whatever it is in the speakers.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think they gotta be to the end of the tables, and that seems to solve it. It's either that or the clerk turning it up too loud.
Yeah.
One or the other.
All right. So the first thing is the Great Lakes boat, you know, I mean, we've been through this, I don't know that we need to have a lot of discussion on if there are any more questions about it. You know?
We'll know in September.
But I would say by October 1st. They said sometime September, I'd say safely October
Because
1st.
their budget year starts October 1st, so
Yeah,
they-
yeah.
a month from now, we would know yes or
We'll
no.
put that word out there.
Okay.
Sheriff, I have a question that we've had a lot of concern in the county in the last week or two about our incident in the bay.
Right.
And I understand there was a lot of while, before boats got out there. I heard 4 hours. I don't know if that's true. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that. And if we had this boat, would that have made a difference?
Okay, that's a great question. The first call went into Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has a tiered process request. So when you call Coast Guard, they don't just deploy a $6,000 an hour helicopter and go out. They have a process. There's 2 sectors. We work within the Sault Ste. Marie sector on the water and the Milwaukee sector on the water. Coast Guard Air Station is separate from that. That's based out of Traverse City, and it goes way up to the UP and Sault Ste. Marie and all over this part of Michigan and over toward Tawas. So there's 2 request processes. The first request was there's someone down in the water, and it becomes one of those quick who's on first. So the boat that Coast Guard sent down was from Charlevoix. And Charlevoix, as you saw in those previous maps, is 36 miles from Leland, and it's in, you know, different positions as far as, you know, where in the bay this went down and so forth. But they sent a 41-footer. In fact, I have a picture of the boat right here. And that boat, it's right here next to our small boat. So that's the big one with the orange side on it right there. They staffed it and they got out there. The response by the time they get the crew together and get the boat there was approximately 4 hours, approximately. I don't want to say exact, but you know, we're calling each other back and forth. We have 4 to 6 footers out there. Our boat is in the water in Sutton's Bay, and it is a center console open boat. So you're going to basically get personnel to that boat and up. What happened in that unfortunate instance, and I know that individual quite well, he was headed toward not just a bar, in basically an old boat that shouldn't have been on the water. You've all seen pictures of it and so forth. It's just a very unfortunate circumstance. He got out there and when he's coming around past the Stevenson estate at Omena Point. Once he got out there in that open water, I think he realized just how bad it was. And I had interviewed people along the shoreline, as well as Trooper Jason Trofe, who did the original, as well as Charlie Belanger. And they said, we looked out there and this guy's out in huge waves with this boat. We're like, what is he doing out there? That's the general vernacular from the public, including some people who are in the marine industry out in the East Coast right here. They do sailboats. He makes the sails for all the regattas and races around the country and stuff. So I talked to him. I said, where was he going? Well, we tracked when he left, approximately 4 o'clock, and when he went down, sometime maybe 5:30, 5:45. It was reported at about 6 o'clock. Lady said she looked out, saw her kayak rack tipped over. There were huge waves coming in. There was this boat that had launched up on shore. It was a good 20 feet up on shore, which is the only way to do that is basically, if you will, cap and do a following wave and get that boat up in high speed and plane. He probably tried to make it into shore. At one point, flew off the boat, is my guess. There were 2 downriggers positioned on the boat. The right one was torn off where the driver would sit behind the wheel. We have photographs of all that. There were life preservers in the boat. He did not have a life preserver on. Had he jettisoned in the water within that time, we could have had a rescue this time of year with water temperatures. Coast Guard did have a helicopter up all night. To get back to your question, how long would it take to get on scene? The boat could have been brought around from Leland, but he went down immediately. So in all honest terms,
Unless you had a boat sitting right in Omina at that time and you knew right where to look, you probably wouldn't have gotten him because he didn't have a life preserver on. Since that, if we had a life preserver on, the boat that Charlie and Richard went out in, the tribal boat was out there. I was neglecting the paper, but the tribal boat was out there as well helping. The Leelanau Township Fire Department sent their RBR out there, the rubber-sided craft. I was on shore with Ryan Lott. We're out in the middle of the night. We're there before daylight, and the water level's so high that we literally had to walk along the shore and lift up the bushes and look underneath because we didn't know if he swam to shore and was exhausted or if he drowned and washed up or what. So it was pretty tenuous. I covered about 1 3/4 miles of shoreline back and forth. Trooper Trofe did about 2 miles, and Ryan Lott did about 3/4 of a mile. So between all of us, it turned into more of a recovery than a rescue operation. That said, when you have a boat emergency on the water in certain areas, you have your certain AOR you cover, and we've gone over those with the maps and stuff before. You have to have the boats pretty much in the water ready to go, and you have to have luck on your side, like they have a life preserver, they're a good swimmer, maybe they're holding on to their kayak. In this particular case, none of the above applied. He, we would presume, went off, as he went off the boat, tore his downrigger off and then in. If he didn't tear the downrigger off, he certainly went off that side of the boat from what we can tell and what we can see. So to have it in the water is extremely valuable. I know some of you had the pleasure of going out on a beautiful day the other day, maybe for the first time to see the islands. You had calm waves, calm winds. It was not a snow rescue. It was not a driving rain. Charlie and I and Richard went out on a driving rain during the Chicago to Mackinac race. We were out, and it was like being inside of a car wash as we're going out there. There's water everywhere. The boat's porpoising up and down. I couldn't even get video. It was pretty violent to hold on to it. So there's those days too, and that's why we had requested this Great Lakes, I'll keep referring to as a Great Lakes class boat. So there's a lot of luck involved. Anytime there's a rescue, you pray. I mean, we were praying. Maybe he was with a girlfriend somewhere, and you know, he just left the boat along shore. Maybe he crawled up on shore, and we knew he was physically disabled to a certain extent. Maybe he's up on shore, but that said, we figured he went down about where he did, and after the state police brought their dive team up, put 2 days in on that, doing side scan, he was almost exactly where you could predict it. How did the boat get up on shore? You had to ride the following wave that was 6 foot or taller. You're up on a wave, and then the wave came in just right, and you launched through the air. When a boat prop is on, and the motor was all the way forward, and the throttle was in the forward position, the key was on when we got there, in that indication, you either went forward like this and slammed it, or you were riding it forward. We believe he rode it forward, trying to get into shore. When he went off, the boat kept going like it was set to do, and it had to have tremendous speed for a boat that had a 30-horse motor that was 16 foot long. It mostly came from waves and height. When that motor is still on, when it launches up out of the water, if it hits the sand, that prop is turning, and it would churn that sand and the weeds, and they'd be balled up in it. The prop was totally clean, which tells me it was airborne until it landed. And we saw where it hit, it dragged like this, and it dragged sand straight forward. We have photos of it. And then had it been on where it launched in and it propelled itself up, it would have run. So we're pretty confident that's what happened. Coast Guard had crews all night. They went back and forth with the helicopter. And again, completely different operations. They had to change the boat crew too. The boat crew left at I was there about 10 after 6 in the morning. When the crews start rallying up, they left by about 7:15, went back to Charlevoix, re-equipped, refueled, and then came back again because the station is so far away, and yet it's geographically our closest station. So.
Commissioner Ansel, did you have a question?
I did, and I was gone.
Commissioner Rushing? Well, did Commissioner Wessel get your question answered?
I think in this particular case, this boat wouldn't have made a difference then.
Nope. And no boat would unless it was right on scene when he went over.
Okay, thanks.
We would have had to come from Leland all the way around the end of the peninsula and all the way back down to Omina Point.
But you would have had a bigger boat in Sutton's Bay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if he was in a life preserver, either the boat from Leland or Sutton's Bay could have helped out, absolutely. Because they're in the water. You don't have to run the sheriff's office, hook them up, haul them down, deal with traffic.
We do find more and more people are wearing life jackets today than ever before, but it still is silly to go out in a boat of any kind at any time without wearing a life jacket. Having them in the boat is nice, it's legal. Unfortunately, what we have found out is that they don't do any good unless you are wearing them. Your boat goes over, you're in the water, unless you're wearing the PFD, it's very unlikely that you're going to get a PFD, don it, and it's going to save your life.
Commissioner Ansel.
I do have a question, but it's not for you, it's really for John on the financing. With where we are with the HVAC system and the commitment that we made about doing that, do we have the funds available to pay for the, my understanding is we have to pay for the whole boat and then we'll get reimbursed. So there, do we have enough money for the cash flow situation, and do we have enough to do the match that we're required without going out and borrowing, based on what you know about the HVAC commitment that we just made?
Yes.
Commissioner Redmond.
We have approved the request for the grant and so on, and so I think that we all kind of had it in our mind that this was going to be happening. Whether or not the grant comes through or not, I did have a conversation yesterday with the supervisor of Glen Arbor Township, and they are still in discussion. I guess they're forming a committee with some members from the fire department and from the township to try to work out some sort of arrangement for us to perhaps be partners with them in that boat, or to accept some responsibility or something. So is that something that, as I say, with or without the grant, that you would still be interested in entertaining?
Well, number one, thank you and Chet for organizing that meeting. We went over there and talked to them about that possibility. That boat is 8 years old. It's in mint condition. It cost $375,000. They had a donor buy it and give it to them. The problem they have is they don't have a harbor or protected marina for it, so they have to rely on hauling it, hooking it up, and hauling it all the way up to Leelanau and launching. So the boat has not worked out for them. My understanding is Frankfurt would really like to have the boat, and they have a big protected harbor and a place to keep it in the water 24/7 and ready to go. Glen Arbor Township could use that as an asset. I'm not saying they would pay them $375 for it, but you and I both know 8 years ago, $375 is probably $450 now. And they really have a need for a fireboat down there. That boat is 100% fireboat. And in terms of us taking it, we looked at it. After our meeting, we went over there. I had a marine surveyor specialist come there. I went there. I have a lot of experience with these boats. Charlie went there with the whole marine crew. And that boat is not designed for law enforcement. The hull is kind of shaped like this as it meets a wave, and we need something like this to cut into waves, send the water off the sides, take much bigger water and so forth. That has 2 large outboards and 1 jet drive inside of it. It's designed for fire. That jet drive runs the pump. And you've got 2 systems that are 8 years old there you're getting into. The thing I look at, in all honesty, is I need to mow my lawn, and I need to have I need to cut a tree. And I need to have a chainsaw, but then in that case I'd be offered a lawnmower. Could I mow the lawn with a chainsaw? Probably in a full day, maybe, slowly. But what I really need is a chainsaw to cut the tree. It's just not the right tool. And if we were in a situation where we had no prospectus to get this boat from the Homeland Security, I would say, let's take a chance on it. Let's see if it can work out. It's not what we need. It's not what we want. It's something, can we make it work? But I've looked at it a lot of ways since that meeting, because, when you look at that boat, it's mint condition. It's like brand new. It's just, it's a lawnmower. We need a chainsaw.
Well, so is the answer to the question no then? Because, we should tell them to
I really
consider us as being an acceptor of that?
And I really think that they were talking about a partnership maybe, where it was kept in Leelanau Marina. We have some problems. The first problem is you can't put a volunteer fireman in a boat with blue flashers. Just like you can't have a civilian drive a patrol car. Blue is reserved to protect the public, law enforcement only. So the flashers would have to be converted from red to blue so that we can make a legal stop. Then on the sides it's red and it's painted Glen Arbor Fire. We would have to put Leelanau County Sheriff. Then we have the pump in the rear and the pump in the front, which are very, very expensive items. It's all set up for that. To work with Coast Guard, to get rescue swimmers on and off, to rescue bodies, we would be working around these large pumps. If we took them off, that would be a tremendous waste, and you would lose that part of the asset, and then it wouldn't be compatible with the fire. If we keep them on, they're in our way for rescues, dive teams, dive platforms. So I would say if Glen Arbor would take and consider that Frankfurt option, because I've heard from several people that they would really like to have that boat, Glen Arbor could recoup a lot of money for it.
Well, that's neither here nor there. My
Yeah.
question is that if you don't get the grant, you're saying that you don't want this other boat either.
Probably not realistically, and I would ask the board, if we didn't get this grant, say in 2 more years, I'll keep trying this process as long as this federal money is there. But if we didn't get it, I'd ask the board for your permission to seek out private individuals to buy the boat for us. And right now, I believe we're gonna have 118,000, you know, our responsibility, I believe we're gonna get that. I'm waiting to hear back from the people, but I do believe there's people out there, I do believe we have good public relations with people, where at some point, we might just have to say, look, will this entity or that individual or this fundraiser, will you buy us a boat? And then the county wouldn't have anything into that. And my goal is not to stick this county with the cost of a big boat. It's like, find this grant, make it work. If not, we'll try some other alternative. But what I'm afraid, commissioners, if we got that, we'd forever look at it and go, what are we doing with a lawnmower? We need a chainsaw. It's just not the right tool. And I mean, I'm not looking to give horse in the mouth either. I so appreciate you guys organizing that meeting, but it's just not the right tool right now.
Commissioner Sudas.
Yeah, I had 2 questions, Sheriff, and you just answered one, which was about the donation, that you are still working in
Yes.
that direction. But you also mentioned storage. You were looking at working with Chief Besson
Mhm.
to try and swap out using his facility to store the boat in the wintertime, and
We
you
would
would
store
store
there.
his.
Mhm.
That's still an option?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
In fact, thanks to your help, I even talked to Glen Lake and I said, would this truck come with it? Because it has a Ford F-250 truck. Well, that's what they use for snow plowing. They said no. And I said, well, if we did this swap around, could we store it here? And they said, well, that's where we've had it, but it's kind of in our way because we could get a rescue rig that could take that same spot. It takes up a tremendous amount of room because it's hooked up to the truck year round. So they could, but they would prefer not to. So our offer still stands with Chief Besson, but we do have to store his boat, which our shed is big enough for that. Once we get the roofing material out of there. Still have that project. Did I ever think I'd be looking at the board and saying I don't want a $375,000 boat? No, it's just the wrong tool, is all.
Okay, so that brings us to inmate housing.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Charlie.
By the way, Charlie, thanks for that trip across that water. You handled that boat with such ease and professionalism. I was impressed, and thank you. You did.
Good afternoon.
Todd?
I think what we're referring to here is probably the cameras that I had requested in my budget packet. Essentially, what we're looking at, if you remember last year, you approved, I think it was $60,000, and we upgraded the actual recording equipment that records the video footage. And we were able to replace 3 cameras. We replaced actually 4 cameras, 1 in each of the courtrooms and 1 in our booking area. Now what we're looking to do is, I've just been trying to phase this project through instead of asking for one big lump sum in 1 year. Now we're looking at about $30,000 to start replacing some of the cameras in the jail itself. Everything in there was put in 2005. They're older, they're all analog, they're not digital. Part of the problem we run into is that they're not real expensive, and we can send it away to get fixed, or we can have it replaced. To fix it is about half the cost, but it takes about a month. So now we have a certain particular area where we have no video coverage for a month. So it's you know, you kind of throw your hands up and say, well, do I spend the extra money just to replace the camera now? Or do I spend half the money and try to get it fixed and I'm down 30 days? With this, we'll be able to replace, I think we have 21 cameras. ASC Security came through and kind of did an evaluation of what we had, where they thought the best cameras could go with what they provide. And they came up with 21 cameras to replace. Some areas we'd be reducing the number of cameras. Instead of having 3 cameras that have to look, you know, here, here, and here, we can put 1 camera that's wide angle and cover the whole area, which helps the corrections staff, because instead of looking at 3 cameras for 1 area, they can look at 1 camera. And total on this entire campus, we're looking at 96 cameras. So if we can reduce the number of cameras we have to look at, yet see the same amount of area, that's obviously much easier for us. So I'm asking for $30,000, which would help us replace 21 cameras. That's everything, that's cameras, labor, wire, everything. And that was through ASC Security out of Livonia. That's who did the work last year.
Commissioner Wessel.
If we didn't replace them and you had to repair them, how would you pay for that? Do you have a repair budget?
I do, it's not real big, but I do have a repair and maintenance
But
budget, yes.
conceivably, if we replaced all the ones that might need repair, some of the cost of the new cameras should come out of a budget that could be shifted from repair to purchase.
It could. That repair budget pretty much covers anything I have to repair, and I think I'd have to double check my sheet, I think it's only $5,000. So that's, you know, if a vehicle needs, actually it's only $2,000. So if a vehicle needs a repair, I mean, to replace a cracked windshield that isn't covered under the county's insurance is $500.
My only thinking on it is this looks like kind of a minor expenditure. I'm wondering if we can find it within existing budgets, and it's not something that we add to our budget. Just a thought.
Sure.
Commissioner Sudas.
Yeah, Lieutenant Roush, I just had one question. I noticed on the, I'll call it bid, or the, was $26,208.30, which is a little different from just $30,000. So I didn't know if there were additional expenses, or you were just doing an approximate.
There isn't. I did an approximate because the last time when we did our project last year, when they were back there working, they ran into a piece of equipment that was not compatible. They thought it was going to be compatible, but it wasn't. And we had to spend, I think it was an expensive piece. It was about $1,500. So they had to replace it. It wasn't part of this. I picked up the cost of that just out of my normal budget. So I just built in, you know, a little bit extra in case something came up. So there was enough to cover any unforeseen issues that we might have.
Ironically, with Mr. Epstein's suicide, whatever it was, one of the things being challenged now is the video. Why wasn't the video on? What happened? That's created a lot of mystery over the thing. Why were those two guards sleeping? Why were they temporary guards? But when it all comes down to it, we're being watched right now. And in that we are is a good thing. If someone comes in there with machetes, they're yelling, screaming, we have their face, their picture, their behavior, and these videos are very important. So I think, you know, if we could find another source, and you know, it's also somewhat like the building project you have here. You could have spent $3-some million and replaced everything, and 20 years from now it'd be 20 years old, or you can replace it as it breaks piecemeal. So if there's a way to do that, we're certainly willing to listen and look at it. And we just want the cameras up. We're not sold on replacing everything. We just want the cameras up and running.
First, I would like to hear John's response. John had, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I think he wanted to respond to
Yeah,
some.
I had his name down and call him. but go
Oh,
ahead.
okay.
As to Mr. Russell, last year's acquisition, I believe we pulled the funds from fund balance from an inmate account, and I think that's the intent this year, if I'm not correct. So
That is correct. That is at my discretion, that you would be using inmate funds versus the fund balance in the general fund. So it's the transfer in from the inmate that is paid to us when they house inmates, as well as the 2% grant that gets transferred yearly into your budget, to your general fund. And in this case, when Todd has a large capital improvement, I look at the fund balance in that fund versus using the general fund. So the $60,000 that he spent this year, you approved last year. He's asking for an additional $30,000 to be in this to upgrade the rest of those cameras that were not done. So it would have been, in essence, around a $90,000 project last year. So he's splitting it up.
Thanks.
So with that said, even though we've got a proposal of 26.2, he's asking for 30.
That's correct.
When the invoice comes in, we're going to pay what the invoice says, and those extra dollars will remain in that account. It doesn't.
Typically, when we approve the transfer, I move the whole item. I can certainly do that with this if it comes in less. where I await and then move in the money that is actually spent. But typically, it's an allocation that it's just one lump sum and it moves in, but I can certainly do that with this project if you wish.
Okay.
I think if I remember last year, I think well, this year, I guess technically, yes, last year, I had asked for, I did the same thing, I think I went like $5,000 over,
Yeah.
and we didn't get it, and the invoice was pretty much spot on with what the proposal was, and whatever was left just sat in capital outlay until the year was over, so.
Right, that's what I wanted to know. One other question. I recognize that the existing cameras are 14 years old. Is there any resale value to them at all?
I can check, I haven't explored that, I mean, I can check.
I was just curious, you know, if you might be able to.
I don't know, I can pitch that to ASC and say, hey, if you guys take our old stuff, would you give us any credit?
Right.
I can check with some other jail facilities and see if they have any use for it, I can definitely look into that.
If there's value left, I would
Sure.
like to see them being used, even
Right.
if it's, you know, in the community.
Right.
Commissioner Ansel.
Are these cameras proprietary, or can we actually go out for bids? You know, analog may have been proprietary, but digital cameras,
Right.
are, you know, I'm assuming we could go out for bids, you know, because it is a large enough money amount that we should, unless there is some reason that we can't.
Last year, I didn't go out for bid, but I did have, I think, 2 or 3 quotes or proposals. One I know was from ASC, and one was from Midstate. Midstate's the company that put the original equipment in the facility, and if I'm being real blunt, I would never want to deal with them again. We have some sneaking suspicions that some of the stuff they put in that brand new building was used. Case in point, not long after we moved into the facility, we had a problem with the computer, the actual tower computer that runs the control panel. Ron got into that computer and said, who put all these programs on this computer? We said, we don't know how to do that, Ron. The computer had a bunch of random programs in it that a new computer out of the box put in to run a single program shouldn't have on it. They charge us exorbitant amounts of money to come up here from Grand Rapids to fix stuff. We would call them and say, hey, we kind of have a major problem. Our doors are not opening. Well, let's see what we can, are you available next Thursday for us to come up and fix that? It's like, no, we're not.
We were buying parts on eBay.
Yeah, we were buying stuff on
Yeah,
eBay,
you know,
so.
I don't want to get into a discussion about, you know, whether we should or shouldn't use a particular vendor, but all I'm saying is the opportunity out there to get more than one bid.
Right.
But
It is, however, with what we did last year, we used the specific vendor and the specific brands of equipment. We have specific types of DVRs. Actually, it's one NVR. There's encoders that are used and all that kind of stuff, so that equipment has to jive, if you will, with the camera. So they sell a specific brand of camera. That's what we've installed here, the 4 that we did buy. All of it meshes together. Sometimes if you piecemeal it, it doesn't last because not everything talks to each other like it's supposed to.
But back to the comment, you could in the bid specs put a specific type of camera. There's different vendors that sell the same camera.
That was my point.
And you have the right to accept or reject any of their offers.
And
so
the
you
bid
still
might,
have-
you know, their bid might be very competitive. I just don't know.
Right, right.
And, you know, if we know what camera you want,
Right.
we could do some, and, you know, and just like you did before, you might
Right.
want to do that check and say, yeah, you know, we don't want to go with this vendor because we've had a bad experience.
Right.
But we can buy these for
Sure.
$500 less or whatever. I
Right,
don't know.
sure, I understand that, and I think, and another caveat to that is, if we have, I mean, you know, maybe next year there's some more cameras I replace, and if I went with just the lowest bidder, who do I call to fix that camera? Do I call ASC because they did the first ones? Do I call, you know, Joe Smith Security because they did these cameras? If you stick with one company who takes care of everything, I know who I have to call when I have a problem. I call ASC for anything having to do with my cameras and my recording equipment. Because if they come in, they're gonna go, well, we didn't install those 4 cameras, so, you know, we're not gonna work on somebody else's equipment. We run into that a lot too. We didn't put it in, we're not gonna work on it. So, and unfortunately, in situations like this, that's kind of what we run into is, it's somewhat proprietary in that they're not necessarily gonna work on their stuff. So if we have to keep a list of every camera and what company installed that camera, we're calling 3 different people to come essentially work on the same system.
We don't have to solve this today.
No.
This is, you know, for budget purposes.
Sure.
But when you come back and say, okay, I want to go buy these cameras,
Sure.
you would be prepared again.
I will see what I can find.
Thank you.
I would be very comfortable seeing we get other bids from a reputable company, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's what I was going to say, that I took this to be all about the compatibility of the system, and I think that is a good point. And it doesn't surprise me that we're replacing these cameras, because cameras these days are absolutely amazing compared to what we had back then.
What we
So-
can do with the cameras that we have in the courtrooms is
It's
is
unbelievable. So
amazing.
less cameras, it's going to be less maintenance
Yep.
down the road, because, yeah, it just makes sense.
You mentioned how many are on the whole campus, and how many now currently are of the old analog type?
All but the 4, well, see, some of them I can't speak to because I like the excuse me, memorial camera.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have anything to do with that one, so I don't know what that is. As far as I can tell, any of these types of cameras up here that are, I think these are Panasonic and Falco, that's pretty much what's on this entire campus.
So that's the old analog
Yes,
type.
so all but the 4 I replaced last year are old cameras.
Okay, so if you are turning over all these old ones to these new digital cameras, you want to start with $30,000 to purchase how many?
21.
21. And get some sort of rotating schedule where this is on a, you know, like we do with the cars or whatever?
Possibly, I think some of the stuff, I mean, what we have has lasted us 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're coming, you know, once every 15 years for 30,000 to replace cameras, I don't think that's that bad. Maybe that's just my opinion, but, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, so we could, I don't know if we could develop a special fund like we have for the motor pool fund. I mean, I could speak to the clerk about that, but.
So when you need repairs on the old analog ones now, you're saying you have to buy things on eBay, or are you getting does ASE or whatever the name of the
That
company
was the
come in?
recording equipment that was in, you know, we had a big computer rack that had NVRs and DVRs and multiplexers, and I can explain all that stuff to you if you really want to know, but it's pretty boring.
Okay.
They took all of that out, and basically it looks like a whole new system back there. So that was the issue with some of those components.
Oh.
The company that developed some of that, Roland, went defunct. So trying to find Roland equipment, which is all that would work with what we had, it didn't exist. So Ron was scouring eBay, I was looking on eBay, looking for used pieces of equipment that we could stick in there it was basically a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, trying to at least get it to work so we had something. I mean, Ron was, at one point, I think Ron bought 3 of them, just so we had some backup, so we didn't have to go back to eBay and be down, because we really don't want to be down for any amount of time.
Right.
I mean, the time that we don't have cameras is the time something happens that an officer didn't see. We need to review the footage to see what happened, and we couldn't because it didn't work.
Just a simple question, and you probably thought about this. You said when the one is down, it takes about 30 days to replace it, to repair it. Could you just not buy, for example, 10 of them per year, have them on stock, so when it goes bad, you have them available?
We could.
And just
Sure.
roll every year, start about doing that? Sounds like they will break down on a regular basis.
No, we have, I mean, it's been, we're going on, what, 9 months now with what we have, and we haven't had a single issue with them.
Because you're supposed to buy 26, but you don't have 26 that are not functioning. Could you
No.
just buy, I just make this number of 10, have them on the shelf, when they go bad,
Well,
take the old one, put the new ones in,
the other
and
issue,
have them in stock.
the issue is we could do that, however, with analog cameras, you don't have Cat5 cable.
Well, that was my next question.
So
Are
they
compatible?
can't,
That's-
no, they can't plug and play. They have to run the Cat5 because it's a digital signal instead of an analog. So the wiring infrastructure isn't even in place yet, so.
But if we do replace these, can we keep the analog ones to replace when one goes bad?
Well, absolutely, yeah, we
I
can
mean,
keep
that's-
those.
So that's what I'm saying, Drew, that's
Right.
kind of what I was thinking.
Sure.
But I'm saying we would already have them.
You can replace an analog with analog, right?
Yes.
Correct.
So if they're over a period of years, since they're not breaking down on a regular basis. So again, I just make this number up,
So
you buy
rather
10,
than-
replace those, you keep the 10 on the shelf.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah,
And
we
that
would
way,
just,
that
we
you
would
could
just,
just kind of plug.
we would just throw them in the
Yeah.
dumpster. I mean, there's enough cameras on strictly in the courthouse, inside and outside, that throw them in a box and give them the honor or somebody and if
Exactly, that's all I
something
was
fails,
saying.
oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner
But
Watt.
how good are those analog photos, though?
Terrible.
Yeah,
Well,
they're not great. I mean,
See,
with the
it
new, before, like a static camera like this, we couldn't zoom in at all. You had to have a pan-tilt zoom camera. With the new cameras that are in the courtroom, the 360 fisheye cameras, you don't actually have a zoom. You're not zooming the lens, you're zooming the picture, if that makes sense. So we can zoom in and see pretty clearly.
Gives
I
you
can
much
zoom
more
in on
detail.
this camera, but the closer I get, it gets pixelated and you'd never be able to know it was me sitting
And
there.
I'm just thinking that sometimes they show those, you watch the news and it says, yeah, here's this photo of this bank robber, and like, you can't throw it. They're awful pictures.
Yep.
And
Interesting you say that. When we had the bank robbery in Empire, Arts Tavern had just replaced their camera system to a new digital system, and within just a few hours, they said, hey, we've got a new video system, look at it. We had a picture, it looked as clear as looking any of you to me, right here of the guy, and that was the guy, and we had side profile view. Then we had him walking up and down casing the cars before he stole a car, all on extremely deep, because they had just, what was it, 16 megapixel or something? It was really high megapixel, instead of the old analog.
Well, that's my point. So I just hate for
Very
anything
clear.
to happen anywhere on this campus and us not having it.
That's correct.
So I would just say, I like the idea, whoever had it, perhaps just begin replacing our cameras with digitals as we can.
So set up a schedule. Okay, so were there any other questions about this? Thank you. So then,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to Emergency Management and Sheriff's Office for the AEDs.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. One of the questions was, why does the AEDs, which are going in the sheriff's car, why are they under 911?
I believe that this was long before either one of us were here. I think that
Stronsky?
Tom got these AEDs originally by a grant, so they magically made their way into my budget. And that's fine, but they need to be replaced, so takes, the bull by the horns and do it.
So you think when it was in Leland, it was actually all under one budget or something, and so it just ended up in 911 or something?
It could have. I don't want to speculate to that.
It's not under 911, it's under emergency management.
I'm
So
sorry.
it's okay, it's general fund, and so it's 225 and 225. It's the same department, but it says the emergency manager has his own segment. So I think, like you're saying, that when they were first purchased, it was a grant, and it shows on his expenses 50/50 grant for AED. So I believe that's how the initial got in here, and then in the past, as we've said, any grant, then you keep on going even though the grant funds aren't there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
The grant funds run out.
Commissioner Wessel.
What difference does it make?
Not a question, just a comment.
Yeah, the grants always.
Yes, they do.
Not a question, just a comment. I can't believe we don't have these in every car that we have. If you approach me, I'm 74 years old, you come to me on the road and there's a problem with my heart, I want you to have one of these in your car and not have call for backup. We gotta have them in every car.
You won't believe this, but you remember the older couple that lost control of their car 2 years ago in Sense Bay, and you hit Dick Dunn's yard when airborne? We only had X number in the agency, so we always give them to the young guys or the new guys first. So I, the undersheriff, and Lieutenant Kiesel were the only three without AEDs. When that accident happened, we were the first three on scene. I did CPR for 18 minutes on the lady. She was alive when she got to the hospital. And Jim and Steve did CPR in the vehicle. We didn't have an AED on the scene. Sutton's Bay Ambulance was on a run to Munson at the time, and their backup ambulance had to come. They got there, said, we cannot believe you guys are doing this. Well, don't you believe it's what we do? But we were the only 3 units. Now, the odds of that happening again, being pencil pushers and stuck over here in the office instead of out doing real world work. I mean, it is what it is, but that's an example, and I believe when you requested that, that also covers the AEDs in this building?
Yes.
It covers the AEDs that our secretaries use and those in our cars, so there was certainly no monkey business of who applied for it or what like that. I did not put in for a tribal request last cycle, because Matt said he was putting in for AEDs. I said, you know what, I won't put in for anything, because the cycle before that, I put in for those placards for the schools, which are coming in now and being installed. And so I thought, well, I won't even interfere with something else, because that would obviously leave more money for him to get his, so.
Commissioner Answer.
Just like the cameras or our cars, shouldn't these be on a rotating schedule that they all don't come expire, you know, I'm assuming they have an expiration date, you know, that they're only good for 5 years, 3 years, whatever. You know, shouldn't these be on a schedule and just?
They should be on a schedule. Yes.
Okay. So how do we get them on a schedule rather than buying one great big lump? Should we do some and start getting them on a schedule just like the vehicles?
Yeah, no, that's true. It was recommended to me, and I agree that we split it up half and half. We have too many that are becoming end of life, so we do have to get them all relatively quickly. So if we did half in 2020, half in 2021, that would lessen the blow.
When Matt and I talked about this, I did mention to him that since this is coming to you currently, there is always an option within your budget to actually do half this year and find funding, either contingency or something to fund it for this year, knowing the expense that we would then budget the rest of it for next year. That is also an option for you.
And how long do new ones last now?
Typically, end of life is, well, depending on the model, between 10 and 15
Yeah,
years.
I would say it's
So
pretty long.
it is an extended long.
So, I mean, we could in theory represent, once we get on cycle, it would be a minor expense every
Yeah, we
year
could.
to keep them current.
Four of the ones we currently have.
Commissioner Law.
We originally purchased while we were in Leland, so they're pushing 20 years old.
Commissioner Lautner.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
So are you, that's okay, are you doing any repairs on the current AEDs?
Whenever they are used, we have to either replace the pads or the batteries.
Okay.
Batteries will die.
Because
Go
you
ahead.
have, in the 2019, you have $1,200. So have you used that yet this year?
I have been using that for pads.
For
When
pads
we
and
had
batteries.
when we
Okay.
had the April incident,
Gotcha.
I had quite a few pads to buy and whatnot, so yeah.
Yeah, but it worked.
It did,
Good.
it did. That's why. I'm
Okay,
happy.
so we can, because I like the idea, if we could have purchased some of them yet this year, you know, and then continue next year. So there's a $1,200 basically every year for this
Yes.
purpose?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So is the additional $1,300 enough then? What's one unit cost?
If we bought them individually, they're, we got a special price of $1,900 a unit if we're gonna buy those. I would have saved $2,200.
So will you even have enough to purchase one unit next year then?
We can work on that schedule and get it right.
Okay.
That's why I mentioned it would probably most likely come from your contingency line
It
item if you
sounds
wanted
like
to
it.
replace them this year
It
and
sounds
start
like
the
it. I would
process.
think we need to look at that closer.
I do too.
Mhm.
Well, and maybe we can make it the third, and it goes into 2021.
You take a look at this April incident alone. Wasn't a deputy happened to be driving by who had an
Yeah.
AED? I mean, what if he had, you know, how much longer would it have taken? How much, would there have been enough time?
It would have been another, minutes. It would have been minutes. He wasn't alone, so,
Yeah, it would have been minutes, but
somebody
how
would
did
have
he
called.
have minutes? You know, I don't know.
It wouldn't have been as fortuitous,
A lot of
we don't know
damage
what
could be
kind of
done.
long-term damage would have happened if
Exactly.
that would have happened.
Yeah.
If you like, I can put this on the September agenda. Maybe Matt and the sheriff can come up with a plan yet for this year, and then come up with a plan for, let's say, 3 years rotating.
I'm very interested in doing
So
that.
I'll put it on the September agenda.
And I might have missed this, but did the tribe grant a 2% request for those?
No,
That's where we're at. Okay, what about if you apply, we generally apply for the December cycle?
Well, you can, there's no guarantee though, that's the
But I
problem.
mean,
Yeah.
at
It's
least
always
if
worth a
we
try.
apply, hopefully, and we apply for the whole slug, and like Jim said, Lieutenant, we'd probably end up with 20 of them. or whatever we need, or however many was it total?
It was 35.
35, so just apply for the whole thing. Hopefully they would, go with that.
Okay.
Well, we'll put it on the September agenda, so if you can come up with a plan, let's come up with a plan for next month over a 3-year period. So
3
some
years.
this year, next year, next year.
Okay.
Just
Sure.
see where that comes out. Okay?
Not a problem.
And you actually check your current equipment, see what it expires.
Okay.
Any other questions concerning this? Thank you very much. That would bring us then to the lien. Okay, not done yet.
That's fine. Yep, so the lien, we are just waiting on IT to establish that virtual private network connection we have with Lansing, and then coordinate with Core Services to turn on that circuit. I do believe that Ron will have to go around and touch every computer in the sheriff's office, which hopefully he's coordinating right now.
And this is all predicated on Traverse City won't let us use theirs anymore? Is that sort
It's
of, or-
basically, we don't want to be held captive by Grand Traverse County anymore. They wouldn't turn on that circuit until there were certain things in place, and then there was miscommunication. We had things in place, they didn't know about it. So for officer safety, we don't want that to happen again.
Does this also impact the courts? Michelle? The lien? No.
You're still on the LG net, is that correct? Yeah.
So just year 2 operation?
Right.
Prosecutors also. Prosecutor license.
Okay, thank you. I knew there was a third
District court,
party.
circuit
Yes.
court, prosecutor, and us.
Thank you. I was saying it was a course, but it was a prosecutor's office, yes. Because they were impacted by that also.
Any other questions concerning it? No, because we were just wondering why, so, thank you. All right, so then that brings us to Central Tower generator replacement.
Central Tower generator has failed on us a couple times. We've sent Gary O'Connor out there and made some repairs. The sensitive nature with that is that we have co-locators that are utilizing our power for that, namely Cherry Capital Connection. So when that generator fails during power outages, they can hold us liable for any downtime that they had. So we wouldn't get their monthly rental checks until it's fixed. So seeing that, it's been recommended not only by Gary O'Connor, but by Bridgeway Power. They do the maintenance on it every year. That unit and the Maple City unit are recommended to be replaced. I have received the specs from, Jerry was able to work with Bridgeway to get the specs on those 2 units, so we can create an RFP and send it out for exactly what we need to replace those 2 generators.
No, okay, so then what about the Peshabi Town tower upgrade?
That, to fix some coverage issues that the tribal police are having on the reservation, as well as tribal fire. We can put a similar solution in place that we had with Northport and Olmina in order to cover that. I'm interested in pursuing the tribal 2% grant in December to cover that. It's primarily for their operation, but we would also benefit from it with our other emergency services.
Well, have you talked to them about outside of the 2%?
Not yet, no.
I mean, this is operate,
Yeah,
this is benefiting them.
right.
Yeah.
So,
And if the 2% were to fail, we would definitely pursue them to cooperate in order to
Maybe
get
fine.
it.
let's do it the other way
Do
around.
it first.
Yeah. Get them to cooperate to pay for something that's gonna benefit them as opposed to us, because basically then they give us less 2% if we go through the 2% funding. Because they have to pay the 2%. They don't have to fix up their tower. I mean, they should fix up their tower.
Well, it's true. I approached it from, they bought Sutton's Bay, an ambulance. That's basically their primary EMS for their people as well.
Right.
But I see your point. I see
Yeah.
your point.
But they also took that ambulance through 2% funding. They didn't
Yes,
just
they
buy
did.
it.
That's exactly.
Yeah, so then they don't have to do anything else for something.
might be a better chance that we get our AED project passed if they were separate too.
Well, that, they have to give us so much money, no matter what, and they choose what it goes for. So, that's why I try to do it for things that are for the government, not for that. Yes, Commissioner.
Going back to the central tower, I just had one question that I didn't quite get in.
Yeah.
That's the one that's failed multiple
Yes.
times. But then you also mentioned the Maple City Tower.
Yes.
So is that gone down too, or is it just?
He said it's very old.
It's very old.
Just
It is
the
very
old?
old.
So you're just concerned about it?
Yes.
Because we had a figure of $10,000, and is that gonna cover both, or is that?
The specs that Bridgeway came back with, a little higher than I expected, so hopefully the RFP process will be able to keep that as low as possible. What they forecasted was 25 to 30.
Per?
No, for both.
Okay. So really, it's not a $10,000 ask, it's a 20 or 30?
So you've got amount is pretty much each then.
Well, yeah, you could say that was each.
So Central's-
Those figures
Commissioner
came in after the
Little had
budget
her
was
hand.
turned
Sorry.
in, so.
Okay.
Matt, in yesterday's lift meeting, there looks like there is some interest, and I think George McClellan is going to get in touch with you in terms of the towers and their current plans and maybe some partnerships
Yes.
with funds.
We have had beginning discussions
So
about that.
they're a lot further along now, so.
Good.
Yeah.
I like hearing that.
I thought you would.
Yes.
Is that it? Commissioner Lautner?
So I was just going to point out that you said Maple City is extremely old.
Yes.
So it hasn't failed, but there's
Correct.
pretty good potential for it, and it was 10 to 15,000 each.
That one's not as big as the central tower, so that one will
Oh,
be
a little
less
less,
expensive.
okay, 10
but yeah.
to 15, okay. And then as far as fiber goes in the county, Cherry Capital Connections is already beginning fiber starting north, moving south, I think. And they still depend on the towers for that, correct?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
They are building fiber to the home. I think you're talking about Birchwood Drive, north of Leland.
Mhm.
They will be running fiber either, I don't remember, it's underground or along power lines. But in order to serve that fiber, it's a microwave connection. So point to point, that's going to come from our tower to their little tower. So they'll still be relying on us.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Something that Matt and I discussed too is, along with the same lines, like when you're talking about the AEDs, we were discussing with the communications tower fund, and when Matt and I were discussing, there isn't a plan to put up a new tower, but there are also improvements. And in your capital, communications capital tower fund, you do have 54,000 in that budget for this year, and I don't believe there are any expenses that we are projected that's going to take place. So if these are items that you feel that you would like to implement, those are also options, again, that could happen this year with an amendment, and Matt takes care of those items this year,
Using those funds.
using those funds. There's
54,000?
54,000,
For generators.
absolutely. It's an over $5,000 purchase, so it's a capital improvement to the towers anyway.
Commissioner Redenbach?
I'm still a little bit confused about the cost of the different generators. I understand Maple's a little smaller,
Mhm.
but did you say 20 to 25 for the central?
Oh, for the both of them. I'm
Oh,
going
for
to
the
say,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, we could bid that out, right?
Right. We'll get the RFP process. We'll see exactly what it comes in as.
Okay, but we
Yeah.
still have 54,000 for.
Correct.
And this.
Yes.
Okay.
We will be able to cover it.
Commissioner Ansel?
Should we not start that process this year then?
Right, that's.
Really, Matt can start the RFP and get that out. So it can be on the October agenda.
If you can, let's take a crack at that.
Will do.
I'd rather, at least that old one, for sure.
I'm more concerned about Central Tower. to be
Are you
honest with
really?
you. I am.
Okay.
Yeah, that one has already failed. We already have co-locators on that rely on us.
It's a large revenue source.
Yeah, it is.
And Matt,
Sometimes the older ones are more dependable than the
Right.
newer
No,
ones.
that's a good point.
And Matt, you do have the specs?
I do.
So it'll be very easy for
Yeah, it's
Laurel
very easy to
go on.
plug them in. The only
Yeah,
reason
that's
I
the
haven't done it,
biggest part of it.
yeah, I was waiting for this meeting, to be honest with you.
Commissioner Rittenhouse.
Now I'm wanting to ask a question about the Fashabi Town Tower.
Okay.
So, there's a gap in the coverage area. How big a gap is that right now?
There are areas of Fashabi Town where tribal police respond where they can only communicate on their mobile radios, so they have to go to the car. If they're in the house, it's next to no coverage. That poses a big problem for them when they, on midnight shift, responding to domestics, and even our guys when they go over there, it's hard for them. The Motorola radios that we use are better than what the tribe uses right now, but there's still limitations.
But so, the coverage area is 30 square miles, or, I mean, is it
Yeah.
just a little pocket there, right there?
It's a smaller pocket. The solution that we would put on the Shabby Town Tower
Uh-huh.
would service more than just the tribal reservation.
Uh-huh.
There would be other emergency services that would benefit from it. Our road patrol, Northport Ambulance, Leland, Suttons Bay,
And who's the owner of the town?
the tribe.
So would they not be responsible for maintaining it?
Well, Matt and I discussed this as
Yeah.
well. They're responsible for maintaining their tower, but it's our equipment, is that correct?
Correct.
It's our equipment that you're purchasing and putting on their
I'm saying you have an
tower.
opportunity to have some dialogue with them. It's their
So
tower
it's
on their
still
property.
it's still our purchase
Yeah, I
to
know what I'm
make.
saying, just to follow up
Yeah.
on that discussion.
It would
I agree
help,
with you.
though.
Try
Right.
to get 2%.
Because you say they're,
Yeah,
the tribe, that's what I was alluding to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tribe,
Commissioner,
Would the equipment on Shabby Town Tower address the Leelanau Township concern about having to switch channels going
Yes.
down the road?
Yes, it'd be the same type of repeater, so they could keep their pagers and their radios on that same talk group or channel for a lot of the drive down to Munson.
Because that continues to be an issue.
Yeah.
It works, but it's one more thing they have to do in an emergency.
Right. It will be one more thing my dispatchers have to do when they tone out as well, so there will be multiple options.
So there,
Commissioner Lautner, I think was next.
I just wanted a clarification on the point. So what you're saying is they switch from the new radio system to the old radio system?
You can think of it that way, but it's not really the old radio. It's our own system. So it would be like the Leelanau County 800 system that
It's
we have.
the
What they call
network.
conventional.
The
Yeah.
network.
The network and our conventional system.
It's from 800 to what did they call the other one?
Well, it would be connected. They're both 800, so it
Oh.
would be from the system to our conventional solution.
Now, Commissioner Law, did you have a question?
well, more of a comment, and why I think that's a good idea to ask, is since they're also not receiving some of the alerts at their station.
Through the primary, they do receive it through our secondary notifications, active 911, and their pagers will pick up some of it as well, but
And
their
you-
mobile radios.
And Leland was also having that problem for some time. In fact, last I heard, is that
Yeah,
better?
we have tried to address it with different solutions. I issued the different antennas for their pagers. I got
didn't
favorable
extend.
feedback with that. I know that the chief is on the backside of a hill, so his is a lot more challenging. What he would need to do is put a external antenna on his house.
Or move?
Or move.
Easy to say.
There you go.
but too bad for the person who moves into his house, because
How much money is in
They
the
won't get any
tower
help.
fund?
Right now, I've already moved the money that's allocated to the 911. So currently, there's 378,000.
Okay.
So you have 378 in your tower fund and 54, almost 55,000 in your tower capital improvement fund. So you're up over 400 and some.
So
And we're halfway through the year.
So there is the money for that, to do those repairs in there.
Yes.
I could bring it back.
I guess I'd still rather have them pay.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think that we should be responsible for the whole thing, but it is something that we should pursue.
I mean, I think the best scenario would be to pursue them first about it, and then we may go to the 2% if that doesn't work out. And then they'd be more amiable even to doing that, knowing that we really want them to pay for it outright.
Right. Good point.
I think it would be better for us negotiating with them, rather than waiting till afterwards.
Okay.
Any other comments on that? So then we go to dispatch council, and maintenance of it.
Yep, we had that approved. We signed a 5-year contract agreement, and we're able to negotiate the price down $15,000. And that was accepted at the Tuesday night.
And I think we've already done that.
Yeah, so that's all done,
Yeah.
it's off the table.
Yeah, who put that on here?
It was on here because it was all, these are all new things
are-
that you wanted to see.
We want you to be fully updated on every single request.
All right. No excuse.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, so then to the tower top amplifier.
Yeah, the tower type amplifiers, basically to improve portable radio coverage on the system itself. It's a piece of equipment that can be rather expensive if we wanted to do it outright. If we were to coordinate with the radio programming unit through Michigan State Police, we can get it at a much lower price. It's not a pressing issue, since it only affects the portable radios and not mobiles, not pagers, or anything like that. So it is something that we can wait for their schedule when they're going to climb the towers. That way we don't have to pay for the tower climbers, and we get basically the tower top amplifier at cost.
Sounds like you're trying to do it the smart way.
Trying to, yeah, since it's not pressing, we can get our other 2 state towers addressed on the state timeline, really.
So, other than that, I don't see.
There's
with any
one more
questions?
personnel request. Won't mention names, but we have a deputy clerk that son has a soccer game at 3:30. And I personally think that deputy clerk should be at her son's soccer game at 3:30. Any thoughts on that?
Are you going to be done soon?
Well, besides that, but any thoughts from the commissioners about?
I think we'll be wrapping up soon.
We're almost ready.
I'll make sure she,
I have football at 5:30.
Oh, see, here we go.
we don't want to feel guilty missing.
I have one last question for Matt before he leaves. Last year, when we went through this process, we talked about your, I don't even know what it's called, command module, the big tank, and there were some necessary repairs. We had a battery that wasn't working. Is that in good shape now?
That is in good shape. The only thing that I would like to have in place is something that Telrad has not been able to install, would be our ability to patch talk groups together in the comm van itself. That's the only thing that's outstanding, and it does not affect our operation. We can still function for Cherry Festival and all that.
That's what I would try.
Sure, we're good.
Thank you. We can carry on.
So are you going to be in that Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I get to be there at 4 a.m. and probably stay until the last runner is done at 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh, good. Well, because I heard Sunday that Division Street's going to be closed, Front
Yeah.
Street's going to be closed.
Don't go to Traverse City. Try to stay
Just so
north
you
of
know.
72 on Sunday.
Yeah, and 72.
Yeah.
Come visit Cedar.
Cedar's
Yes,
open.
sir.
The hardware store is open,
Cedar's
right?
open.
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
You can get some good kibasa.
Got some good kibasa, some ice cream.
So I was just happy to hear
Probably
you
not
be
even
there
go to
at
West Side
4
Community
a.m.
Church on Sunday. That's going to be crazy too.
You'll be going past my house then.
Yeah.
You're going out on the highway.
Yeah.
How are you affected?
It affects us a lot. I just pray that everybody's safe and, nobody drowns, nobody gets a bike accident. As far as our personnel, we'll have 4 to 5 units tied up. State Police is doing the majority of everything. This outfit worked around us. I'm all for athleticism. I admire athletes in that kind of shape. I just think shutting down public roads in order for them to do that is out of the line. So as it is, it's going to go forward. State Police are handling the vast majority of the traffic control. In our concerns, we've jointly discussed this. Lieutenant Kiesel is heading up the operation. We are basically making sure our ambulances and our fire trucks can get from point A to B. regardless of bicycles, and that's our most important thing, as far
That's
as.
my primary goal in the command center is to coordinate that.
Yep, and it will inconvenience people at several churches, and it's a Sunday morning, it's gonna change things, but culturally, it happened. Traverse City kinda did this to us. I recommended three different routes, that they could go out Supply Road, they could go along Long Lake and Silver Lake. They don't wanna do that, they wanna ride up here. And their initial proposal was 56-mile ride up through the length of Leelanau County, basically all the way 643, 641, and one of my alternatives to that was, why don't you guys go out to Empire and use the Heritage Trail? Well, they don't want to use the Heritage Trail. They want to use the road. So that said, at least they're going east-west, and they haven't incurred into the middle of our county. So I hope it's safe for everybody. I hope it's successful. I hope it works. And we'll have to reevaluate afterwards in case we have any emergencies with ambulances or fire trucks, so.
Is it true?
I would like some feedback.
They are loaded with money. The state police can have.
I don't care.
What I'm saying is, it wouldn't cost us any money to be more involved, because they will reimburse everything, but it could impede our operations, and that's what I'll give you a report on.
Yeah, if we have an ambulance that can't get through,
Right.
I wanna know about it.
We'll get you on that, I'll be right on that, absolutely, Matt will too.
Commissioner
Absolutely.
Lautner had her hand up.
I heard a rumor that the Ironman actually paid for the M72 new upgrade. Is that true? Is there truth to that?
I don't know about that. I wouldn't be surprised. They have built bridges in other countries just to house, be able to make their route. But I did not hear that myself,
Okay.
that they did the
That's
70.
another thing you can find out and let us know. 'Cause
It is interesting,
it's a
though,
nice
that
road.
Traverse City initiated this, and they're gonna swim in the bay, which won't affect traffic. And they're gonna ride, or do their running on the boardwalks, which won't affect traffic, but go ahead and ride your bikes up in Leelanau. And that's where most of the problem is. So I just hope that everybody's safe, it works out, state police will handle most of the logistics, and if there is any issue, we'll deal with it. We'll come up with a report.
Personal question, I have grandkids visiting that must be back in Traverse City at 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. How do I get there?
Helicopter?
Yeah, helicopter would be great.
You have a vote?
You go Saturday night, get a hotel on that side of town.
They're all booked out.
Hotels are probably gonna be booked.
Every hotel's
You got a
booked out.
camper? No, I'm kidding. I think if you came down 22, but you're gonna have to leave early. Yeah, I would leave early.
They won't shut 22 down.
No, it's 22 down there. It's gonna go to one lane on the parkway. So you're gonna have, we're gonna be funneled down to one lane. So that's gonna back up traffic. Where do they have to be in Traverse?
Out by the airport.
Okay.
Well, you could take 641 and go up around.
You're not supposed to get through on Gray Road.
You can go the back way.
Yeah.
And go
Well,
up around.
Right now, could get through on Gray Road.
Gray Road's gonna be
Oh.
tough.
Envision Empire all the way to Traverse City is kind of a no-go zone.
Oh,
Thank you
Yeah.
for the heads up.
No problem.
no go at all.
Ride your bike, I guess.
I'm staying home that
Yeah,
day, so it doesn't
that's
matter to
right.
me.
Get one of those kitty carriers?
Okay, so I think that's all we have for you. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank
Really
you.
Appreciate it.
So process-wise, for my edification, when will we find out if we're supporting the aforementioned projects, or does it go to a vote at some point, or, for instance, a patrol boat, I still have your support with that? Or how does it
Well,
work?
that's what we'll go through when we go through the budget. We just wanted to get the
Yeah.
information so everybody knows that when we vote
I
on it
see.
and put it in the budget or not, then, and then you'll know when it goes into the budget, and we have to have that by the end of October.
Okay, that was my question, because
October
we'll know
1st.
by the vote by the 1st of October,
Yes.
so I'll coordinate.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate, thanks all your time.
Right now, our last budget meeting is scheduled for September 17th, so
Okay.
hopefully we'll have it.
We should have
Well,
that.
yeah, we should know by then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So then we have potential joint meetings with Leland.
Yeah, we talked about that, we talked about that at the meeting, that obviously if we're gonna move forward with the dam, any engineering can be covered, but any other work cannot be done, so if we're gonna move forward with that, we need to move that quickly. John just told me you did a little bit of research on the assessment, you wanna just tell him?
I got Rob Urban, we pulled up the 2005 special assessment district, we counted, I'm estimating from our last discussion, there was 1,500 RUs at that time. So we're gonna have some splits and new homes and stuff like that he's gotta calculate for the new district, but with the dam authority's leadership, I thought I'd step in and simply ask Rob to help out
this is not critical of dam authority, but I think this is beyond their ability, that we need to get involved, because it's gonna end up being your decision. You know, how much, how it's gonna be divided up, for how long, how many years, all this, I mean, those are big, major questions.
How much we're gonna cover?
Yeah, well, those are major
Yeah.
issues.
Okay. So yes,
So I'm thinking one of the meetings we have scheduled, just to go on, so we have meetings scheduled,
I forgot.
current my notes, August 29th, 1 o'clock, September 10th. After the executive committee, September 13th at 1 PM, and September 17th at 3 PM. Would you like to have joint, at one of those meetings, have the dam authority members here and focus on this? Or do you want to have a special on top of it?
So August 20th, our next meeting is next Thursday at 1,
No, August 29th.
I mean 29th.
Yeah, next Thursday at 1. I don't know if they're available or anything, but, or we can just continue with the budget process, but at one point, we need to have, I think, a joint meeting with them and make this a priority, have a major discussion on it.
Maybe you can check, since we've got X number of budget meetings scheduled, see which ones they might be available to attend.
I would say don't tell them that they're not available, see if they're not available, if we try to get them.
However you want to do it.
But I see what your preference is.
Any of those, and just block them in at a certain time.
How about September 10th? The reason I say that, it's after our executive. Rob needs more time to break down that District 2. So I'm thinking maybe we focus on our budget on the 29th, next Thursday, and September 10th. Do that with the dam authority.
I like that.
That gives them a little time.
Fine with me.
That gives them time to plan. Does that make sense, everyone? Does that agree?
So before the 1 o'clock budget, after the executive, or,
Well, it's going to have to be part of our budget, as part of the 1
Okay.
o'clock.
so do it on that time.
I just wanted to point out on the agenda today, at the very top of the page, it says Friday, August 13th.
Oh,
So I don't know if that needs to be corrected.
Well, mine says Friday, August 23rd.
Well, mine says the 13th.
The ones you handed out got the wrong date on it.
yeah, I think Laurel just must have not changed it. She must have made it.
Okay,
That's the
well, I
official.
didn't know if it was posted that way or,
No, it's definitely posted. I know it's posted. We just post them, the minutes, the meetings are all posted properly.
Okay,
you know.
I just-
But thank you for catching that.
I just wanted to point it
No
out.
one looked at that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, for potential future topics, we talked about, from the last time I made some notes. You want to talk about the PRE, or Parks and Rec's budget, not PRE budget. Sorry, John, didn't want to get you upset there. Parks and Rec's budget, including that part-time minutes person that they had. You want to have a discussion on personnel in the Register of Deeds office. There was discussion about having the health department come in and talk about their budget, and long-term IT options, the Leland Dam, and whether or not we're going to go for special funding for 911 or we're going to take it from our budget. We kind of have gone back and forth on that. We need to make a final decision on that. Michelle and Jen feel comfortable that we could fund it internally. John, comfort level is not the same, I would say. Is that a fair assessment?
I would like to see an increase in the surcharge.
Telephone surcharge?
Yes.
I would say this today, I would say looking at 911, we're locked into 911. I would say let's look at funding it internally with a potential slight increase of the phone surcharge.
Then it has to go to the
Yes, go
public
to the
vote.
voters.
We're at our maximum amount.
That would be next year though. Well,
We cannot increase, we're at the maximum, anything above what we're assessing now has to be a vote of the public.
2020. So I would say personally, let's look at funding it internally right off the bat. And then that gives us an idea of where we are with any other requests for the budget. But look at, if we don't funding it for, 2020 right off the bat, with the potential of going for the funding, an increase in the surcharge, and that would be for 2021, correct? Yes.
Mr. Answer.
It is increasing every single year. You know, we were thinking that, okay, we're gonna do these upgrades and, it just increases every year. The technology changes and, I do not see an end to the 911 funding issue? Is this going to increase every single year?
John, do you know how much we have spent since we started? I mean, you approved 3.6, we knew it was gonna be over a period of years. We haven't spent that much yet, have we? So we're still within that original plan, but we know it's gonna continue, you're right. But when you approved, was it 3 years ago now? The whole project, we knew it was gonna continue for the next couple of years. So that's where the debate about funding. So none of this here, I mean, everything that we talked about today was discussed during that report 3 years ago. So I don't want to think that Matt is just coming up with all these things. These were part of it, but you're right, the costs are just going to continue as technology advances and changes. Items become obsolete, new technology comes available. Some of it's mandated that we have to use this, like the Lee, really don't have a choice. With we were basically forced to go to the 800 Motorola because that's what the state dictated. So a lot of things we have to be reactive, some things we have to be proactive.
Commissioner Wesson. What's the projected annual cost that we need on top of what we're already collecting? Then I have a question.
Currently 911 in its full capacity is being subsidized by the general funds levy. So,
But if we were to add a budget item, would $200,000 a year extra?
I think, yeah, any additional right now, because your annual debt payment is 276.
Just a thought, we look for this for everything, but what if we negotiate with the tribe on this and say for the next 5 years, we'll hold off on any 2% request. We'd like 2% request to last for 5 years, and you help us with our 911 responsibility.
Never gotta go for that.
Well, it's worth.
Well, we can ask them.
Yeah. That's what they ask. It's kind of what this is how it used to be. We used to get that one check from them, rather than having to allocate.
Their challenge is that tribal membership changes almost every year. And they're in political turmoil, it seems like most years. And so it'd be hard for them to commit, I think.
And the good news is that we wouldn't have to argue among ourselves on our policy.
That's right. That's why it's worth an ask.
That would solve that problem.
But our
There you go.
payments, our annual payments for equipment currently is how much?
276.
276? I thought it was 286.
This year.
Oh, it's dropped down.
It fluctuates as the amortization goes.
So,
We started off at 276.
And we have 7 years left on that?
So that's coming from the general fund.
Right. You know, and then we gotta start considering, you know, we're gonna have to do a roof on this thing too. You know, at some point.
Don't disturb the gods.
Most counties, when John and I did the research, most counties have switched from a millage to a phone surcharge.
It was staggering, 70%.
Yeah, that's even counting the ones that passed originally. I don't think last year any county asked for millage. There were several votes on 911, but they're all in the phone surcharge. That seems to be the way the trend is going. If you, at one time you talked about wanting to do a per household, that was major effort, would have to take a vote of the House and Senate. If you truly want to do that, we would need to start that now. But the phone surcharge, if you want to do that, we can wait for the normal election cycles.
Your election cycles will start in March.
Yeah, this year there's a presidential election cycle.
Yeah. So, Commissioner Lyon.
Thank you. As I understand it, it's speaking to representatives, we can ask them to start that legislation, but would not only benefit us, but also townships, to give townships that ability to ask for fire and rescue millages per household rather than
Village.
ad valorem. So we can ask them to start that process, whether we actually ever use it or not, whether a township ever uses it or not. That piece of legislation would be valuable to both of us.
As I understand, it would be quite controversial. And what they don't want to do is start the process, our local reps, and then the county board says, no, we're not going to do it.
Well, I understood
So I'm
differently,
just saying
because I asked them that outright.
Yeah.
And put that way, that made sense to them, that would be And will it be controversial or not? I think that not necessarily would have to be for those type of funding requests.
It's a more equitable.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just getting it through the House and Senate and passed, signed by the governor.
Michelle?
I don't know if you're going to discuss this more, just so we're clear though, the 276, which is the payment that's due, correct? That's going to come out of your radio communication, and the funding for that is transferred to radio communications from our radio communication projects, which we've pulled out from fund balance. We have our radio project user maintenance fees, our contribution from local units. We do use a portion of PILT to fund that and transfer in from wireless 911, which is Fund 213, and we did not transfer any in from DTR this year to balance
No,
it.
that's
So
correct.
for 19, or for proposal for 20, we do have a balance. So just an FYI that it's under your special funds, regardless of what you decide to do, that's where it's located.
Right, well, I mean, if I look just from memory, we've got 118,000, I believe, or 119,000 on the
Surcharge.
the surcharge on
Yeah,
the
that's-
phones.
yeah,
And then we get 50,000, I think it was from PILT. And then 38,000 from the other
Local matches?
local match, you know, their fees. So that comes to 206,000. So we're talking $80,000 out of our budget, which I do think is a doable thing. I mean, without going out for another fee, or a higher fee on everybody's phone.
But the-
For
Sure.
next
Yes.
My comment is that, the intent with those maintenance fees is not debt service. It was for, future replacements.
That's why it's called maintenance fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're using it for debt service. And if we have to come up and replace a unit's radios, that's gonna come out of fund balance because
Which will happen eventually.
yeah, so I just wanted to make a point.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's the 38,000, the
Yes.
local matches.
Yeah.
Which can also be negotiated higher.
Well, we signed 10-year contracts.
Oh, is it 10 years with them too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Paid off, that's how long we got it left.
So we're
Well,
here
for future,
three.
for the replacement maintenance, we're already how many years in? 3? That's only
Yeah,
7 years
another
off.
7 years.
Mm-hmm. Not that
Right.
far away.
So,
If you think there's gonna be another project after this?
Well,
well, I think that's your point, is that it's gonna keep
It's never
going.
gonna,
Yeah.
Right,
it's never gonna happen.
and everything keeps going up. My taxes do too.
mhm.
So to help the clerk and I for the next meeting,
Yeah.
what would you like to focus on, the agenda? Do you want to have a dialogue on the presentations here today?
Well, I think we should go through the rest of it, if we're gonna do any interviews or any other questions.
Yeah, I don't say do you want to invite the ones I mentioned here?
So that would be the Park and Rec,
Parks
the
and Rec.
Register of Deeds, Health.
Health Department?
Yeah.
Technology?
Pardon me?
Technology?
Well, that's a long-term discussion, we can put that off too. It's not for next year.
Okay.
But the dam, we're going to talk on September 10th.
Right, so it'd be the other three
Yeah.
at least.
The 911 funding, we just had a kind of a dialogue on it, unless you're going to further ones. But what I thought we could do is bring in these other people we just mentioned, and that'll kind of wrap up at least the presentations, and then you could focus on how you wish to structure these or prioritize them. Commissioner
I
Wesson.
have a question for the administrator. I do want to have the Register of Deeds come in. I want to do it in a way, since she's the only department head that's being asked to defend personnel, I'm wondering if we can talk just a second about the process for doing that. Can we get some comparative data? I don't want it to be a beat up on the Register of Deeds, but in my way of thinking, that's one office that we could do a reduction. But I'd like to do it in a way that's a positive discussion.
We get some comparisons, I think we do have some from, that we got when we did the clerk.
We did on salaries and staff. I think we did, because I think, let me double check. I don't got the salaries, but I thought we went back and asked for staffing levels.
We did.
For counties that were, the 11, 12 counties that were about our size.
Yes.
I think we went back and asked for staffing levels. If not, we can try to get that.
Specifically, like one big question is how has technology changed the way that office functions?
And I think it was a topic of discussion at the clerk's office. It was a little bit in our administrators conference that counties are exploring different options with that service more than other services, just because of technology. And some of them have chose to merge them together.
It was interesting, when I was at the MAC conference, I sat with an administrator from one of the counties south of us, and I had posed that question, in her opinion, in regards to shifting Register of Deeds over to the clerk's office. And her perspective was, if you have a clerk that is involved with the courts, to add the Register of Deeds, in her opinion, she felt that that was not a compatible scenario. However, if the clerk were to eliminate the court part of her responsibility, if that was delegated someplace else, then she felt that Register of Deeds and clerk could be combined. But in her opinion, she said for a clerk to be in charge of court and Register of Deeds, she thought because the jobs were vastly different, that it would be too much for one department. So that was perspective from another administrator, for whatever it's worth to you.
Commissioner Wessel.
That's helpful. I'm not thinking just though the possibility of combining the two. I'm looking at staffing, even if we left them apart, looking at staffing level, because of the change of technology and how we do the Register of Deeds position. Might we reduce a full position or a half a position in the Register of Deeds office, regardless of whether we were combining two offices? So I'd like it to be a bigger discussion than just combining with the clerk.
Well, I think the option you could do, back to the original question, is you'd like to have an update now that the new software is in place. You'd like to have an update how that's impacting the services.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what your question is, really, right?
Right, and I do think on the numbers, you actually got the numbers of the clerk's office. I don't know that we got them for the staffing.
I think we may have one.
Okay.
I'll go look.
Yeah.
I'll go look. I just don't.
Commissioner Ansari.
It's not just this latest upgrades that she's done. If you look at what they do there, in the past 10 years, technology has drastically changed that department, how they do their job. So I do think it is a good question to ask, not just because of the latest thing. The latest thing is probably not the biggest slice of what has already happened. And if we had the opportunity to look at comparable counties, and I don't know how you do that, number of parcels or whatever, but how much activity is going on in the Register of Deeds office, compare staffing levels with other similar counties, however that you look at them, that's what I would be interested in.
And for me, that same thing goes with the court. We've got, words about they've talked to somebody and they've talked to somebody else and they have conflicting, but I'd like to see what the staffing levels really are in comparable counties, so that if we're going to add someone on, we say, okay, yes, it is because of caseloads or because of whatever, not just because someone asked for it, or something like that.
I think,
Right.
you could combine people up there to do that.
We had them before, so we should have them now.
Yeah.
So, but anyway,
I-
any other statements or anything? I mean, we're on numbers, the second three.
I was just going to say that many of our offices run pretty lean compared to caseload, and they do it. They get by and they manage because they all pitch in and they cross-train and they cover each other, and it works. I mean, it's been the case in this building for a long, long time.
I think we have a full agenda for next week.
All right. We can cross off the second three. All right.
What are we crossing off?
The second three. We got 1, 2, 3, 3.
Oh, yeah, we
All right,
do.
so, well, in Laurel's defense, she did this Tuesday night after our board meeting, before she was rushing to get us out before the trip on the island, so I'm sure she.
That's fine. We just-
Boy,
All right.
Public catch it, good job.
Public comment. Seeing none. Commissioner comment. Very good meeting. Thank you all for behaving. I appreciate it.
What about children?
Okay, we are adjourned.
And you did a much better job than Tuesday night.
Yeah, you got that right. I was
You were
really talking about
You were focused.